was conscious on the way to the hospital. He was conscious in the ambulance. He was conscious after they did the surgery.
For decades, Tupac Shakur's final hours have been wrapped in mystery and unanswered questions. Now, a nurse who was right there in the hospital room has finally spoken up, shedding light on what really happened during those chilling last moments. From Pac's final words to a revelation that still shocks people today, new details are coming to the surface. This isn't rumor. This isn't internet myth. This is a story straight from someone who witnessed it all. So let's break this down properly. The real story behind Tupac Shakur's final days. Yo, let me break this down real quick. September 7th, 1996 was supposed to be nothing but celebration for one of the greatest to ever touch a microphone. Tupac Shakur, just 25 years old, the undisputed king of the West Coast, had just watched Iron Mike Tyson absolutely destroy Bruce Seldon in under 2 minutes at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Vegas was lit, the energy was crazy, and the whole strip was buzzing off that win. But when you live a street life, even your biggest moments can turn deadly in seconds. Tupac Amaru Shakur was sitting ringside with Death Row Records CEO Marion Suge Knight, watching Tyson do what he does best, knock people out cold. The fight ended so fast that fans felt like they barely got their money's worth. But for Pac and his crew, the night was far from over. They were heading to Club 662, Suge's own spot, where Tupac was set to hit the stage for a charity event later that night. But the streets don't care about plans, and when the streets call, nobody is untouchable. As they moved through the MGM Grand Lobby around 8:49 p.m. Pacific Time, one of Suge's guys, Trayvon Trey Lane, spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. Anderson was a known member of the rival Southside Compton Crips, and this wasn't some random face in the crowd. There was real tension behind that moment. Earlier that year, Anderson and his people were accused of trying to rob Lane at a Foot Locker. And in the streets, disrespect like that never just fades away. What happened next would spark a chain reaction that changed hip-hop forever. According to witnesses and security footage that captured the entire scene.
In that situation, he was never the leader of violence, but that's where he was at. And I think that was different. That struck me odd. That he was leading that shows that he was trying to show somebody he's with us. He's with you. Not he's in the game, but he's with you.
Tupac walked straight up to Anderson and asked if he were from the South, a coded street question about Crip affiliation. Before Anderson could even respond, Tupac swung on him, knocking him to the ground. Then Pac, Suge, and multiple members of the Death Row crew jumped in, stomping Anderson out right there in the casino. People who really knew Tupac later said this moment felt off. That level of aggression wasn't typical for him, especially in such a public space. Kendrick Wells, someone close to Pac, would later speak on how strange and unsettling the situation felt even in real time. Looking back now, that brief confrontation inside the MGM lobby wasn't just a fight. It was a spark that led to one of the darkest nights in hip-hop history. See, Wells understood something that a lot of people completely missed. This moment wasn't about Tupac trying to play some hardcore gangster role. This was about loyalty. It was about showing his Death Row family that he was willing to ride no matter what. Everybody knows Pac wasn't officially a gang member, but he was heavily influenced by the environment around him. When someone comes up and says, "We got an issue," Pac's mentality was simple. You handle it right then and there. That mindset would end up changing everything. And let's be real, Suge should have never let it get that far. Tupac was $1 million asset, a global superstar, and he never should have been anywhere near street confrontation like that. But the code was different back then. Where Pac came from, if there's a problem, you fight it out. Everybody understood that logic. So when that situation popped off in the lobby, it escalated fast. The beat there eventually got broken up by hotel security, but by that point, the damage was already done. Orlando Anderson was bruised, embarrassed, and humiliated in front of hundreds of witnesses.
I literally had my hand on the back door, opening the back door. And Pac stopped me and turned and said, "Hey, Frank, here's the keys to Kadada's car. You go drive with the Outlaws so you could be our designated driver and drive us back after we leave the club tonight, from drinking."
Security escorted him away, but anybody who understands street politics knew this wasn't the end of anything. In the world those young dudes lived in, respect meant everything. And getting disrespected publicly, especially by someone as high-profile as Tupac Shakur, demanded retaliation. That kind of moment doesn't just fade away. It sits, it brews, and it comes back harder. After the MGM Grand incident, Tupac and the death row crew made their way back to the Luxor hotel where they were staying. Pac changed clothes, switching from his orange silk shirt into a green basketball jersey. While there, he had what would become his final conversation with his fiancée, Kid Ada Jones. In a decision that may have saved her life, Tupac told her to stay back at the hotel instead of riding with him to Club 662. Alexander would later look back on that moment and get chills thinking about how close he came to being caught in the crossfire himself. The convoy rolled through the neon-soaked Vegas streets, lights flashing off the pavement like a movie scene. Around 11:05 p.m., they were suddenly pulled over by Las Vegas Metropolitan Police bike cops for blasting music too loud and for having plates that weren't clearly visible. Ironically, the song shaking the car was from Tupac's unreleased album, The Don Illuminati, The 7-Day Theory, music the world wouldn't hear until after he was gone. The cops didn't ticket them, though. They let the convoy slide and sent them on their way. And what makes that moment feel even more haunting is what happened next. A photographer named Leonard Jefferson snapped what would later become known as a final photo of Tupac. The picture shows Pac sitting in the passenger seat at a red light, smiling, relaxed, completely unaware that he had less than 10 minutes left on this earth. At exactly 11:15 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Tupac and Suge were stopped at a red light at the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, right in front of the Maxim Hotel. Pac was chopping it up with two women in a car next to them, inviting them to pull up to Club 662 later that night. It was such a normal moment. Just a young star flirting at a stoplight, making plans, living life. Nothing about it felt dangerous. Then everything changed in seconds. A white, late-model Cadillac with four men inside pulled up on the right side of the BMW. Frank Alexander, riding directly behind them, so what happened next clear as day. A shooter in the back seat rolled the window down and fired at least 12 to 13 shots from a .40 caliber Glock 22. The gunfire ripped through the night with deadly precision. Tupac was hit 4 times. 2 bullets tore into his chest, one puncturing his right lung. Another struck his arm. One more hit his thigh. Suge Knight was grazed in the head by either bullet fragments or shattered glass. In those terrifying seconds, Tupac tried to crawl into the backseat to escape the gunfire, but he was struck multiple times before he could get out of the line of fire. The Cadillac then sped off down Koval Lane, disappearing into the Vegas night, leaving chaos behind. Despite having a blown tire and injuries of his own, Suge made a desperate U-turn. He drove nearly a mile, running red lights, racing toward Las Vegas Boulevard and Harmon Avenue, in a frantic attempt to get help. When police finally stopped the vehicle again, what they found would haunt first responders forever. Former Las Vegas police officer Chris Carroll was one of the first on the scene. He repeatedly asked Tupac who had shot him. According to Carroll, Tupac responded with one chilling word, "You." Carroll later said those were Pac's final words before he lost consciousness. But others who were present, including Suge Knight and Frank Alexander, never confirmed hearing that. Once again, Tupac's lost conscious moments were left wrapped in mystery and contradiction. As paramedics rushed to stabilize him and prepare for transport to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, none of them could have imagined what they were witnessing. The man bleeding out in that BMW wasn't just another shooting victim. It was Tupac Shakur, and his fight for survival was about to capture the attention of the entire world. The University Medical Center had seen countless trauma cases come through its doors, but nothing could have prepared the staff for what followed over the next 6 days. When Tupac was rushed into the trauma bay that September night, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds, doctors weren't just treating Vegas street violence. They were fighting to save one of the most powerful voices of a generation.
Right after I heard Tupac got shot, and I was so weak I damn near fell over. I immediately flew to Vegas, and I walked in the room, and I seen him laid out on the bed with all kind of tubes in him. And his mom came over to me, and she grabbed me, she held me up, and she said, "Baby, you got to be strong." And I went and sat next to him and was whispering to him, telling him I loved him and to hold on and he was going to be okay. And even in that moment, his mom was thinking more about me than herself and showing me how to love strong.
Tupac was taken into emergency surgery that lasted more than 2 hours. Surgeons focused heavily on controlling internal bleeding, especially from the chest wounds that threatened his life. The medical team worked with urgency, knowing every second mattered. Outside the hospital, Word was already spreading through the hip-hop world like wildfire. Meanwhile, Suge Knight, whose injuries were considered minor, was treated and released on September 8. Tupac, however, remained behind, fighting the most important battle of his life. The first sign that this wouldn't be a normal recovery came early. Kendrick Wells, who stayed connected to Pac's inner circle, began receiving updates that were cautiously hopeful. That hope wasn't just rumor. According to Suge Knight, Tupac was conscious during those early days and even speaking. In a 1996 MTV News interview given just a week after Tupac's death, Knight described moments that painted Pac as a fighter who wasn't ready to give up. Even then, Tupac was still resisting the darkness closing in around him. Knight's account of the ride to the hospital paints a picture of the Tupac most people didn't see. Even bleeding out from multiple gunshot wounds, Pac was still thinking about the people around him, still aware of everyone else's safety. That's the kind of loyalty and awareness that separated him from the rest. Suge described moments where Pac joked through pain, giving instructions, checking on his crew, and even worrying about how the scene looked to outsiders. It was wild seeing a man in that much pain still holding it together like a general in a war zone. But as the hours and days passed, Tupac's condition became more and more critical. From September 9th through the 12th, he was taken back into surgery multiple times to deal with a punctured right lung and stop the internal bleeding that threatened his life. Every operation was a battle, every second a fight between life and death. His body was strong, but his fighting spirit sometimes worked against him, refusing to stay still, refusing to let the doctors control the situation. On September 13th, 1996, the world lost Tupac Amaru Shakur. He was pronounced dead at just 25, the result of respiratory failure and cardiopulmonary arrest from his gunshot wounds. But Tupac's story didn't die with him. In fact, the controversies, contradictions, and unanswered questions from those final days would only grow louder in the years to come. From hospital whispers to conflicting eyewitness accounts, his last hours have been dissected endlessly, fueling debates that continue to this day. For those close to him, the grief was immediate and crushing. For the streets and the hip-hop world, it was disbelief mixed with anger. According to Kendrick Wells, the confusion and secrecy inside that hospital room only deepened the mystery. Conspiracy theories started forming instantly, spreading from the streets to media outlets worldwide. An autopsy was done the same night, and Tupac was cremated at Davis Mortuary shortly after. That speed shocked everyone and gave rise to countless theories. Suge Knight later said that Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, insisted on immediate cremation, even though Tupac allegedly wanted to remain awake. That difference alone sparked debate. What really happened in those final hours? Some of the most controversial stories from Tupac's inner circle came out years later. Allegedly, a few of his closest homies honored him in the most unorthodox way, rolling his ashes into a blunt and smoking it. Suge, who was on probation at the time, did not participate. True or not, the story captured the way Tupac's crew lived and grieved, deeply personal, loyal, and unafraid of breaking norms. But beyond the rituals, it was the conflicting narratives, the secrets, and the gaps in the story that kept everyone looking for answers. Investigators, journalists, and fans have debated every detail for decades. In a shocking 2025 interview, Suge Knight dropped explosive claims that contradicted almost everything previously reported. He alleged that Tupac had asked him to end his own life to avoid jail for the earlier brawl with Orlando Anderson. According to Knight, Pac believed this would protect his soul. Even more startling, Knight claimed that Afeni Shakur gave Tupac pills to ease his pain and instructed doctors not to revive him if he stopped breathing, saying, "Let him go." These statements, unverified by other sources, challenged the narrative of a mother desperately fighting for her son's life. The investigation into Tupac's motive was riddled with problems from the start. Witnesses, including Suge and Death Row crew, clammed up. Sergeant Kevin Manning, leading the case in 1997, warned that the murder might never be solved. That silence wasn't just street code, it reflected a deep mistrust of law enforcement ingrained in the community. One key witness from Tupac's entourage was even killed before giving a statement, and crucial leads, like the white Cadillac spotted near the shooting, were never fully pursued. Decades later, these failures still haunt the case. From the streets, suspicion immediately fell on Orlando Anderson, the Southside Compton Crip Tupac had confronted earlier that night. Street logic was clear. Public disrespect demands public retaliation. A 2002 Los Angeles Times investigation suggested that Anderson fired the fatal shots in retaliation for the MGM altercation. But Anderson was never charged and was later killed in an unrelated gang shooting in 1998, taking his secrets with him. Afeni Shakur filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him in 1997, but justice in the streets remained elusive. The case seemed frozen in time for decades, until September 29, 2023. Dwayne Keith D. Davis, Anderson's uncle and a Southside Crips OG, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder with a gang enhancement. Davis had publicly confessed his role in interviews and even in his 2018 memoir, apparently trusting that decades-old immunity would protect him. He admitted he was in the front passenger seat of the Cadillac, with Anderson and DeAndre Smith in the back. Davis claimed Anderson was the shooter, but refused to name the trigger man, citing street code. Under Nevada law, aiding or conspiring can carry murder charges even if he didn't pull the trigger. Even after Davis' arrest, the drama didn't stop. In interviews and confessions, he made explosive claims that stirred the streets. He alleged that Sean Diddy Combs, head of Bad Boy Records, offered $1 million to have Tupac killed, tying the murder directly to the East Coast-West Coast feud. The revelation reignited debates about the rivalry, loyalty, and corruption in hip-hop. From his final moments in that hospital room to the decades of secrets, Tupac Shakur's death remains one of the most infamous and mysterious events in music history, leaving fans and the streets searching for answers that may never fully come. These allegations, which Diddy has denied, added a whole new layer of conspiracy to what many thought was just a straightforward street retaliation. But the story gets way messier when you dig into the accounts of the people who were actually there. Suge Knight, the only surviving witness from the shooting itself, has given multiple versions over the years, sometimes even contradicting himself. And when asked about Davis' arrest and whether he'd testify, his answers were telling. This creates a wild contradiction. Knight insists Orlando Anderson wasn't the shooter, yet he won't name the real trigger man. And, of course, he made his stance on snitching crystal clear. The most disturbing part? How Tupac's death has been turned into a commodity for people to profit off of. Kendrick Wells has openly criticized the media coverage, calling it disrespectful to Pac's legacy. Now, Davis' trial is scheduled for February 2026, and some hope it will finally bring answers after nearly 3 decades of questions and speculation. But the obstacles are massive. Key witnesses are dead, crucial evidence is missing, and much of the case depends on Davis' own statements, which have changed over time. Still, the streets never forget, and the theories keep evolving. Gene Deal, who once worked as Diddy's bodyguard, has been dropping serious insight on how the feds might link Diddy to Tupac's murder. He mentioned a check from Eric Zip Martin for $1 million, allegedly from Blackground Records, and no one in authority has ever denied the existence of that check. What's wild is how investigators never fully followed up. They could have easily checked Blackground's accounts to see if the payment was actually made, but somehow nobody with the power to dig that deep ever did. Looking at the current situation with Keith D., Tupac's father, Billy Garland, doesn't hold back. He sees Keith D. as a snitch, the type of cat who would tell the slave master where the slaves are hiding. Garland believed the system used Keith D., and now it's using him again, a perfect example of how the streets get manipulated to close cases. People in the hood are still talking, and the general feeling is that justice might never truly come. And not the kind of justice Tupac deserved. Too many key players are gone. Too many stories have changed. Too many people with power benefited from burying the truth. Frank Alexander, who was there that night, summed it up best. He explained how anyone could walk into a police station today, confess to killing Tupac or Biggie, and they likely wouldn't be arrested. The case has been so contaminated by conflicting narratives, public theories, and exposure that even a real confession might not stick in court. That night, the hood lost more than an artist. We lost a leader, a voice for change, someone who could have bridged the streets and the system. Tupac's legacy isn't found in courtrooms. It lives in the memories and hearts of those who truly understood what he stood for. As we wait for Keith D.'s trial, the streets are watching. The history, the betrayal, the conspiracies, it all reminds us that some truths aren't written in legal documents. They are felt, remembered, and carried forward by those who lived it. Tupac Shakur wasn't just a rapper. He was a symbol, a voice, and a movement. And the hunt for the truth behind his death continues, still capturing the attention of the world decades later.